Again, I invite you, and I want to thank those who participated in the last session. But if you would, if you're in a quiet setting and you're willing to participate, it is so helpful for me and for others. Like I say, we are going to learn from each other. When you throw things out there, it helps. One of the things that I did since we don't have an application process, so what I did as Equitable chair, I developed my own little sort of table where I would gather data from, this was back before Ezra, and I would fill in things like worship attendance for those years, their indebtedness, ministerial support, how did it change, support for other staff, how much did they spend, their total expenditures, the number of giving units, their total receipts for the general fund, let's see, total from other projects. This also can be an interesting thing as, I had one church that was, man, they were raising $15,000, $20,000 a year through fundraisers, and that was kind of a scary thing. So that's something to note. Total Methodist funding, like I say, from other sources, and then I want to know what percentage of these things. We've talked about most of this. Reserve funds. Somebody mentioned that they had a $30,000 in CDs. So what are they reporting they're holding in reserve funds? So kind of, you may want to create, if you don't have an application process, you may want to create some sort of table or some way of collating data that you want to receive from them. And it may be this data. The numbers, of course, on this have changed, like I say, from tables 2 and 3. But like I say, it's really old. Sorry, I pulled it up from an old PowerPoint, so you will forgive me, I hope. I don't know if you read my bio. We adopted a little 8-year-old last year, and well, it's been a year and a half now, so he takes up a lot of my time. So, all right. Is there any other data, Paula, or some of you who have applications, is there other data that you look for that you like to see right up front that's you consider, that's a key piece of information? Anybody? Don't make me call on you. I'll go back to here. Like I say, all of this is readily available through Ezra. Paula's run away on me. Oh no. All right. Let's see. Making grants. I want to throw out a couple of scenarios and get your input. So unmute those microphones and get ready to throw in your ideas. A district superintendent sends you a grant request for a church that has a retired supply the last 4 years. The church has seen good growth, and the DS wants to appoint an elder with at least 6 years experience. The request is for $4,200 to bring the salary up to minimum. The data shows the attendance is up more than 20%, and the number of giving units is up about 10%. They've paid 100% of their apportionments the last 5 years. What's your next step? Are we ready to rubber stamp, say approve, let's go? What else do we need to know? We're all good with this? We're ready to approve it?
The budget would be helpful.
Budget would be helpful. Okay, yeah. The church is moving in the right direction. We're doing good. Anything else?
How long the grant is required?
Pardon?
How long they're going to need the funding?
How long they're going to need the funding? Okay. Actually, you're becoming prophetic with that answer. Because the next slide, looking at the financial reports, you notice that under funds received from other projects and sources, they've averaged about $20,000 for the last 3 years. Now, what do you do?
Guess I would ask the question of what they're spending that $20,000 on.
Thank you, Gold Star to Paula. Yeah, they're raising this other money. Where's it going? I'm calling
I
the
want to know where it was coming from as well.
Okay.
Is it a cell tower that they're going to continue getting the money for, or is it just a fluke?
Yeah, thank you, Nan. Excellent. Looking at let's see. Okay, so Upon calling the DS, you learn the special project funds have gone to pay off a direct billing arrearage owed to the conference, which they will pay off that debt in December. Now what do you do? They still have a short-term problem.
Question would be whether or not they're willing to continue doing that kind of fundraising.
Right. That. And if they are, then you say, well, I might approve that, but I'm definitely going to set a time limit. If you can do that kind of fundraising, then you probably only need my help for a year.
Right.
So even though my normal is say 4 years, 3 years, whatever, man, if you can do that kind of fundraising, this is definitely, and this is the perfect scenario for what kind of thing they need a little help for a short-term issue. And that helps the conference too. Now the conference gets out of that direct billing arrearage, and that solves that problem. So, it helps, but it's not a long-term kind of thing. So yeah, perfect. Problem solved. But if you don't keep asking the questions and going in, if you hadn't looked and researched, you might have funded this for 5 years, and that would have been a total waste of money, wouldn't it? So again, knowing some more of the details helps you determine the length of the grant and what's going on. All right, there we go. Let's see. Case number 2. Now this is to kind of get you thinking today. Take a look. I hope you can everybody see these numbers pretty well? The average worship attendance has gone down over the last 4 years.
Jeremy, if I interrupt you for a moment, the email for this session is just coming to you all. So if you need to open the email to see the numbers on the slide a little bit better, it should get to you in as fast as the email machine can get it to you.
So Sharon has sent an email with a copy of the PDF of the slide. So if that will be bigger for you or easier to manipulate, you're certainly welcome to do that. The indebtedness has gone down steadily. Ministerial support climbed and then leveled off. They've raised their money for support staff. The expenditures have gone up and come back down. Giving units has fallen. Total receipts has fallen. They started raising money through other projects. Their apportionments are plummeting. The direct billing is going down. Funds in reserve up and down, but generally down. Okay. Let me move on to, so what questions might you ask of looking at these numbers? What more information might you want to know? Anyone? Unmute your mic and go for it.
What's the plan as they move forward? What's their 2, 3, 4 year plan?
All right. What do you think may have caused that change from 2010, 2011, and so forth?
It'd be a number of things. It could be increasing age of the congregation, or it could be the main source of employer in the area moved out, or it could be that there was a pastoral change and they don't like him.
Yeah, which may mean changing the pastor again might solve the problem. So that's an interesting thing. Was there a pastoral change there in 2010, 2011? Is part of the reason the numbers are falling that some of the deaths that have occurred have been of significant givers. And again, that's going to be hard to replace. I'm curious about, they've almost doubled the staff budget. I mean, who else are they? It's not a whole lot of money, but again, it's I'm wondering what's going on there. They're hiring other staff and yet making a request. So just the numbers prompt some questions. All right, I love this next one. It's really interesting. The numbers, man, they have shot up from 2009 to 2012. Ministerial support, though, for some reason went up and then has taken a big plunge. One thing I noticed, actually, this is a real scenario. was that the line for non-accountable reimbursements suddenly went up. Other staff has remained the same. Expenditures have fallen. Giving units have gone up, which is interesting. Total receipts, oh, well, look, we don't even have numbers for the last year. The apportionments have gone up. That's nice. Direct billing has gone up some, but not, it's gone up. What do you think is going on here? Remember earlier I mentioned a pastor who kept going to churches and needing equitable compensation? What was interesting was, and this we discovered was the pattern. He started moving funds out of his salary into this non-accountable reimbursements, and then saying they needed ministerial support because they couldn't pay the salary. So he basically was giving himself a raise through non-accountable reimbursements and then getting equitable comp to fund it through paying his salary. Well, that was an interesting case. So digging into the numbers, even some of them that you may not, normally I didn't even look at, like I say, there's a line, it used to be a line, I think it's still there, for accountable reimbursements, and then there's a line for non-accountable reimbursements. And when it started changing, it was like, wow, what's going on here? So it pays to do your homework and dig into them a little bit. Okay. Now I really want your thinking caps on for the next one. Case number 4. A request for funds is submitted that includes the attached information. Also included is a statement from the DS. This is a 2-point charge. Asbury is doing well, but St. John's, the smaller of the two congregations, has experienced several recent deaths of significant contributors. However, a new development is being built nearby that could offer potential growth for St. John's. Now, if you have the PowerPoint PDF, do not look ahead, please, because you'll figure out the answer. But all right, so here's sort of the ministerial support form that you get that says, well, this is the request. This is how they've broken it down. And the DS says, hey, I want equitable comp to pay $3,000. And now St. John's is going to pay $13,525, and Asbury is going to pay this. This was part of maybe a multi-point charge or a part-time local pastor, whatever. What do you notice about the numbers from the two churches? Other than the salary line?
Other than the salary line, looks like everything else is the same.
Everything else is the same. Thank you, Phyllis. So what does that mean? They split everything, ministerial cost 50-50, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, other than the ministerial line, which would be if they didn't have this plan for equitable comp to offset this $3,000. But we know one church is doing well and bigger than the other church. Is a 50-50 split the way to go? Phyllis is shaking her head. Probably not. That 50-50 split, and I've discovered this as equitable comp chair, multi-point charges tend to establish how they divide up the responsibilities, and they never change them. And they stay there for years, no matter what happens to the different circumstances of the church. So years ago, Asbury and St. John's, a 50-50 split might have been ideal, but times have changed. So what might you do to correct this balance?
Percentage.
Do percentage. Phyllis, are you looking ahead?
No, I've been in this situation.
Oh, I have too. And you know what really got me with this situation? I was at a 3-point charge where they already had these preset numbers. The smallest church was spending every dollar it had to pay the pastor and pay its bills. So guess what? I could never get a raise because the smallest church was the limiting factor. The other two churches were basically netting about $10,000 to $15,000 a year. So they could afford to pay me more, but the small church. So I had to do something to change the percentages. All right. So how do you change the percentages? What information do you need to change the percentages?
What I did, I called my husband and asked him, since he's a finance person, can you add this out so everybody can tell me how to do this? And I sent it to the DS and it was approved. So each one had a different percentage of what they could pay, and it even out at the end.
All right. So everybody, what you do in this situation is you call George Coates and you will have the answer.
Yeah. I'm not the mathematician, but he's good at it.
All right. Nan, I see you're open. Do you have an answer?
You've got to get financial information from both of them. You need to know where they stand, what their future projections are, you know, for the next year or so. And then you need to get the finance people of both of the churches to sit down with each other and say, okay, this is where we are. How are we going to reapportion this?
Right. And the interesting thing I discovered is, you know, to be as organized as the Methodist Church is, if you serve a multi-point charge, other than staff parish and the charge conference, there's no committee that spans all three churches. You know, they all have their own separate administrative councils. They all have their own separate trustees. So there's no collective group other than SPRC or the charge conference to make a change to the percentages.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, I did have two different, I had a charge conference that was made up by both churches, and we developed a plan. We're dealing with both churches under the direction of our district superintendent, and that's how we worked it out. We had to come together. We had to be transparent and just say, this is not working. So this church cannot do this. You all can. Let's work it out.
But the thing is, do you
Seems
want
to me that the first question you really need to ask is, how long ago was the percentage developed?
You may want to know.
Why was it developed at that point? And if it was based on membership at that point, then you can adjust it again if it was based on membership. If it was based on other thing, then whatever it was based on, you need to look at what that data is, and that becomes the point at which you have the question about how you make a change in the percentage.
Yeah, I would hesitate to go with membership because membership doesn't always equal finances.
Exactly.
Well, I understand that, but it's whatever they did when they divided it and it was 50-50 back, whatever they did, right. You need to go back and figure out what that is and then raise the question for them, what has changed since then?
Okay. And
how would that change the percentage? And if it was based on membership back then, and if the membership at Asbury is 25% higher than the membership at St. John's now, then that means there should be a change in that percentage.
Okay. Often it's hard to figure out. Most of the time the churches I've asked her, they don't know where the numbers came from.
You can also look at involvement. When I served a multi-point charge, there was one church was significantly larger than the other, and the way we calculated how they were going to contribute to that is where I spent most of my time. So the bigger church had more going on that they needed me present for, so therefore they were going to pay more of my compensation, while the little church had much less going on and needed me to be present for their much less going on, so they paid a much less value compensation.
The thing is, though, as Equitable Comp Chair, you're not in a position to work that out necessarily.
No, of course, but the DS can help with that.
But right now you've got this problem, and you know this is not the solution. Just giving them $3,000 to this charge is only a short-term solution. As Phyllis was mentioning, the difficulty I ran into is I didn't want to call a charge conference to try to hash this matter out. So what we actually did was drafted a document to create a charge committee made up of the leadership, the lay leaders, the treasurers, and all the leadership, had a charge conference to approve that with the DS's permission, and then gave that committee the task of solving this problem and dealing with charge issues. This actually is a real scenario. It actually happened, which is why what I did was I looked at the receipts for the two churches, and said, okay, since I'm an outsider, but this is hard data I can look at. And these are pretty close to the numbers for the two churches. Like I say, this is a real life scenario. And if you look at it based on the overall charge, Asbury's spending or receiving about 62% of the money, whereas St. John's is only getting about 38% of the money coming in. If you look at the charge collectively and do what percentage each church is getting that. And then I went ahead and looked at, okay, well, what about expenses? And very similar numbers, although if you look here, Asbury was netting about, or grossing about 62. They're only spending about 53. So they're actually, or 58, they're netting some money here. So obviously they're doing better than St. John's. And in terms of expenses, the numbers are close to what we were looking at a few moments ago. And so what it tells you, looking at these numbers, is a 60-40 split is going to be much fairer than a 50-50 split. So when you do that, and you come back with this, and you average the receipts and average the expenses, and then average those together, you see a 60-40 split is probably where you want to go. When you do this, and you come back, you see, now you can go ahead and split the numbers. You see, now we've got them divided up so that it's more balanced between the two churches. Here's my question. You're the Equitable Comp chair. This is what you work out with the DS and the churches. But where do you tell the treasurer to send that money, that $3,000? Does it go to Asbury or does it go to St. John's? Somebody's got to have it in their budget and their coffers to write the check. So who does it go to?
The answer to this question depends upon whether one treasurer writes the check or two treasurers write checks.
Okay.
Because if Asbury, for instance, is 60%, if Asbury's writing the checks, then it needs to go there. If St. John's writing the checks, it needs to go there.
And if both churches are writing checks, I would say the percentage should be 60-40 of the 6,000. Because that was my situation. I had two treasurers for one,
right,
for the two churches.
All right, I'm going to disagree and I'm going to explain my logic to you. What we're actually trying to do here is get this number right here, this 19.5, needs to be 22.5 long term.
Okay.
I need to transition the larger church into taking on more responsibility, and I need to cushion the blow for them. They eventually are going to take over this 3,000. St. John's, I'm already giving them the $3,000 discount. We're already cutting them back. But ultimately, when we finish in 3 years or 4 years, they've got to be up to 22.5, and they're still going to be at 15. So I need to give this 3,000 to the bigger church to cushion the blow. Do you see what I'm saying? That makes the transition. They aren't biting off the entire 3,000, but eventually they will. So strategically, I want to give the money to the bigger church. Plus it also, you're telling them, hey, y'all are now going to pay 60%. And the other church is going to pay 40%, but hey, I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to go ahead and offset that so that you don't immediately have to do it. It makes, how many churches are going to go say, yeah, we want to take on 10% more? They're not going to be happy about that, are they? So you want to think strategically and think, where can I strategically put that money? And I want to give it to the bigger church because they're the ones who ultimately are going to absorb that bigger percentage. But this makes it easier for them to swallow that pill because they're not going to be happy about it. It's the fair thing to do, but they're not going to be happy about writing, spending more money out of their money. So when you're faced with these situations, it's counterintuitive to help the church, the richer church, but they're the ones you're asking to take on the bigger responsibility. So, and besides, you've already discounted St. John's. They're right where they need to be. So, okay.
How does that affect the mentality of the people? Because I went through this. and I don't ever want to do this again. But how do you compensate for the mentality of the church that's having to give up? And then they always are called the smaller of the two churches. Mentally, they're going to stay small because they're always told that they're small. So I had to deal with that. And then the district superintendent changed it to the percentages like we had before. And then the smaller church started growing because they felt like they were somebody. Can't keep telling small churches that they're small. They're going to stay that way.
Well, you tell them that they're doing their fair part and that they're not overdoing. And you explain that to the larger church that, you know, you can do more because you have more resources, but that doesn't mean that other churches any less. In case you missed it, here are the calculations. The advantages to this is it's more equitable, which of course is right in our name. I mean, we want it to be equitable. It also is more responsive to ongoing changes. Now, if that development happens near St. John's and they grow, if you do this as an ongoing recalculation every few years, you can adjust the percentages and it will be more responsive to changes. Because in 10 years, if that new development and St. John's gets a bunch of members, they may be the ones paying 55% and Asbury may be paying 45%. So this puts in place something that can go. And what you've done is you've used CEC to help the bigger church, help the church make the transition. And that way you've benefited everybody. This was a good use of resources because you've made a change that will now be sustainable, ongoing, no matter what happens, which church grows or which church shrinks. If they learn and do this process, they'll both be able to benefit. Any questions about that? Sometimes just doing what we're asked to do without thinking about it and thinking it through and trying to make the situation better. I could have just said, okay, I could have told the DS, hey, John, here, I'll send you $3,000. And that wouldn't have solved the problem. So, but we worked together and worked with the churches and made a difference. So, and they're off equitable comp these days, so which is a nice thing. All right. Any questions at this point? Everybody still awake? Okay. How many of you are familiar with paragraph 626? You know about paragraph 626? I see a few hands going up. Paragraph 626 authorizes the creation of a sustentation fund. An annual conference may establish a sustentation fund for the purpose of providing emergency aid to the clergy of the conference who may be in special need. On recommendation of the conference council, finance, and administration, the amount needed for this purpose may be apportioned to the pastoral charges as the conference may determine. The fund, if established, shall be administered jointly by the bishop, the appropriate district superintendent, and the chairperson of the Commission on Equitable Compensation, or the chairperson of such other agency as the annual conference may determine. I'm sure you're intimately familiar with 625, but you need to be familiar with 626. Do any of you have a sustentation fund in your annual conference? Anybody? Yes. Okay. Stephen, I'm going to pick on you. Can you tell us how it's used?
Generally, we use that to boost some salaries above basic minimum.
Okay.
People who are in circumstances that they never seem to move ahead, and so this gives us. Also, sometimes it's used in strategic appointment making.
Okay.
So that we're not asking a pastor to lower their salary to go into a place where they are strategically and missionally needed.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on how it's used in your annual conference? Yes, Paula. Yay. Oh, you got to unmute, Paula.
Yep, I am. Okay, so we have our sustentation grants, which I have to sign off on them as chair of the committee. but mostly it's decided between the DS, the church, the DS, and the cabinet. And the categories that they can put that into are pulpit supply, health leave, maternity, paternity, or something else.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, we have missional grants, a section for a line item for missional grants. And we have a different committee that works with churches who are considered to be missional, that are always in need of dollars because of where they are and the people that they're serving. So those are the two basic ones that we have.
Okay.
So
the reason I encourage you to develop a sustentation fund in your annual conference is this is where you also get the funding for the ones that don't quite fit your parameters, the ones that may say, I'm not sure I could fund that out of equitable compensation, but the cabinet's saying, hey, we need you to do this. And so this is what the sustentation fund is for. Like you say, above minimum. I had a case several years ago where we were asked to fund a pastor whose family was undergoing extreme medical bills. And the cabinet said, okay, we can't move him right at this point. We probably can in a year or two to a more as higher salary, but in the short term, he needs help. And so we didn't have a sustentation fund, so we funded it out of equitable comp. So I wish we had a sustentation fund for that, for pastors. A pastor has a heart attack and is out for 3 months. You've got a pulpit supply issue because the pastor wants to keep getting paid and the church doesn't want to pay another pastor to come in, a retired supply. So, I mean, you need this kind of thing. The important thing I want to point out to you is it says it can be controlled by equitable comp chair or some other agency. I like to hold on to as much power as I can. If I were you, I mean, because you were intimately familiar with equitable comp issues, I would try to write into somewhere into my procedures and my report that you as the equitable comp chair is the person in your conference who's designated as that person. I've known annual conferences that designated the chair of CFNA or someone else. Yeah, I saw eyebrows go up. Yeah, to me, if you take on equitable comp, if you are passionate about equitable compensation, then you will be passionate about justice issues and those kinds of things. It's not just accounting for you. And so I think this is the right place. So my encouragement here is find a way to control the sustentation fund as the equitable comp chair and make sure it's under your authority. Like I said, it's easier. It's because it's just the bishop and the district superintendent and you in control. And so that's some ways helpful. It bypasses a lot of things, but it can be very useful. Okie dokie. I want to point out some things just for me. Judicial Council Decision 492. Are y'all familiar with Judicial Council decisions? Some are nodding their heads. You can Google Judicial Council Decision UMC and it will take you, you can find the pages. A ministerial member in good standing of an annual conference is entitled to an appointment and must be remunerated for the period of time that no appointment is made. This amount shall not be less than the conference minimum salary and other remuneration provided in the conference rules, prorated for the period without appointment. Why would someone never not be appointed? This, I urge you to go back and read this. It's been a couple of years since I read this case, but if I remember right, what happened was an elder refused or did not want to take an appointment. So they gave him another appointment. This was even less advantageous concerning his wife's employment. So he refused to take that one. And it was right before annual conference. The bishop said, we'll deal with it after annual conference. Well, annual conference rolled around and the bishop got frustrated by this whole situation and decided not to appoint him. So July passes. Finally, toward the end of August or September, the bishop finally appoints him and the pastor filed for salary for July. say, you owe me money. I should have been appointed. And the Judicial Council agreed that he should have been paid at least the minimum amount set by the annual conference. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where there's an elder who has not been appointed, get ready to pay them. So just let you know. By the way, when I would encourage you, particularly, are any of you expecting to experience a change, an Episcopal change in the coming year? I don't see any hand, maybe. If you are, when we changed bishops, when I was the chair, there was a letter on his desk requesting a meeting with me. I sent it 3 weeks before he even got there. And he met with me about 2 weeks after he got here. Sit down with your new bishop and talk about any concerns you have about equitable comp and let them know up front who you are and that you're serious about your position. By the way, the Judicial Council said CFNA is actually responsible for the payment, but chances are, since they don't have funding, they're going to turn around and call you and say, hey, I need you to pay this for me. Go ahead and pay it. I mean, it's now political leverage you have with CFNA and say, hey, you have to add this to my budget for next year. So it's good thing. Judicial Council Decision 1013, the Conference on Finance Council on Finance Administration must consult with CEC before submitting a recommended budget to the conference. Did you know that? CFNA is required to consult with you about your budget request. Consultation means the Conference Commission on Equitable Compensation, the Conference Council Ministry will make good faith efforts to reach an agreement about the support necessary to fully fund minimum base compensation and base compensation for clergy. Let me stop right there. So in other words, if you put in a request for $250,000 and CFA says we're only going to fund $150,000, but they make no effort to talk to you about that and come to an agreement, they have violated this council decision. They can't just arbitrarily cut your budget. They have to make a good faith effort. The last sentence says, actually though, CFA doesn't set the budget, the annual conference does. So you could actually take this to the floor of the annual conference. I always make sure that my report, or always made sure my report included my budget request, even if it differed from what was in CFA's report, so that we had to, I might amend it, but I had to amend it in mine, or else if I got the conference to pass it in my report, guess what? CFA had to change their report. So, must be a good faith effort, which means I had a standing appointment with CFA in one of their meetings, their budget meetings, to talk about my requirement for the coming year, and we negotiated face-to-face what we were going to do. So this gives you some leverage with CFNA. So I advise you, like I say, write it down, read the whole decision. It involved, like I say, CFNA just arbitrarily cutting a budget, and you need the money. You need the money. If you honestly say, I'm going to need $200,000, and they only give you 150, what happens in December when you've run out of money? Can you keep paying pastors? You're going to, and they're going to have to just eat the loss. But this is important. Be careful how you don't want to make the chair of CFNA mad, but you want a good relationship with them. My last 4 years, it was a friend of mine. We were on each other's speed dial, so we talked back and forth about our requests. Here's one, the Book of Discipline. We always talk about guaranteed appointments. The Book of Discipline nowhere talks about guaranteed appointments. It's Judicial Council 1226. Security of appointment has long been a part of the tradition of the United Methodist Church and its predecessor bodies. Abolishing security of appointment would destroy our historic plan for itinerant superintendency. Fair process procedures, trials, and appeals are integral parts of the privilege of our clergy, of right of trial by committee and of appeal, and is an absolute right which cannot be eradicated by legislation. So if you're looking for your guarantee of appointment, you won't find it in the discipline. You will find it here in this Judicial Council decision, which it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You have a right to an appointment if you're an elder. If they don't make the appointment, you have the right to money. All right. Any questions about that? Everybody's muted their microphone, so you're not ready to just jump in. Anybody want to jump in? Okay. Here's a question you should ask and think about. Do the rules of my annual conference make it possible that an eligible pastor may be denied full compensation? Think about it. When I met with the bishop, one of the promises I made to him is that I would do my best, that there would never be a judicial council decision concerning our annual conference during his tenure about equitable comp. And so I kept my promise to him. The last thing you want to be is have your bishop up on a question of law before the Commission on Equitable Compensation. So yeah, you just don't want to do that.
Jeremy, you do have one comment in chat that says, according to our policy, if an elder refused a full-time appointment, the pastor is not eligible for minimum salary.
Say that again. Repeat that. If
according to our policy, if an elder refuses a full-time appointment, the pastor is not eligible for minimum salary.
If they were appointed to less than full-time, they would still have claim on equitable comp funds, but in 25% increments. But technically, they could still make a claim on the funds. I mean, you can have that in your policy, but I don't know that it's enforceable, and I would hesitate to try to enforce that because, like I say, with the judicial council decision we just read, even if they are not given an appointment, they're still going to be entitled to funding.
In California, Nevada, if you refuse a full-time appointment, then you write a letter saying that you are taking a less than full-time appointment. You are willingly taking a less than full-time appointment.
Okay.
And if you were asked to take a less than full-time appointment when you didn't request it, then the equitable comp steps in. But if you you wouldn't move because your spouse has a job and the only appointments available to you in your area are less than full-time, then you have to request to receive a less than full-time. And at that point, since you've requested to not have it full-time, then you're not entitled to have full-time. That's how we work it.
Oh, okay, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if you requested less than full-time, say a 3/4 appointment, and the church couldn't afford that, then equitable comp could still bring it up to 3/4 time, the minimum.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying is, you still have to bring it up to whatever level, whether it's full-time or 3/4 time. If the church can't pay it, the pastor still is entitled to it. The charge conference, this is paragraph 247.3. The charge conference shall, in consultation with the district superintendent, set the compensation of the pastor and other staff appointed by the bishop. Does the work of CC conflict with this idea? How so? I'll tell you the answer is yes, it does. Have you ever thought about this? Our policies actually violate this paragraph. Can someone explain to me how? Come on. Y'all know you want to answer this question. All right, so what happens when a church goes on equitable compensation in your annual conference at minimum, and you've got it going down every 3 years, but haven't you then just prescribed the salary for the next 3 to 5 years, depending on your situation? Nan's nodding her head, thank you. Yeah, you've just determined that pastor is going to be at minimum compensation with any changes you make for the duration of the time they're on equitable comp. So basically, equitable comp has just set the salary, not the charge conference. They have to adopt what you give them. Which, go ahead, Paul. I see you want to say something.
I was just going to say, I'm not quite sure I understand how that works. If we're giving, when we give grants that reduce for several years, aren't we expecting the church then to be in a position to pick that up?
Right, but what I'm saying is, so in my annual conference, so let's say it's $40,000 is the minimum salary.
Okay.
The church can only pay 36,
Okay.
and I reduce it every 4 years by $1,000. So in year 2, I'm paying $2,000, and the church is paying 38. What if the church says, "Hey, we can afford to pay 39, and we still want your 2, and we're going to give our pastor a raise to 41"? Dell's shaking her head, saying no, because your rules probably say if the church can pay another 1,000, then you'll reduce the grant by 1,000. So basically, you've capped the salary and said the church has to pay their point, pay up to a certain point, but they can't raise it above minimum.
Okay.
But
So
they are allowed to opt out of the program.
They are allowed to opt out of the program. But here's the thing, and a pastor approached me about this. You know, if a pastor is working hard to bring their church off of equitable compensation, yet they're stifled because for 4 or 5 years, they're stuck at minimum with no chance of a raise. So one of the proposals I've made, and I still haven't gotten it passed at my annual conference, is to say during the last 2 years, the church can offer an additional, say, 5% raise. Just to say they can add another, on a $40,000, we're only talking $800. But it would mean something to the pastor. But I would encourage you to give some thought to this, that what do you do to what you're saying to the pastor when they're on equitable compensation now is their salary is capped for the next 4 years at minimum with no chance of, no incentives.
And our conference minimum goes up every year.
Okay, but I'm saying they're capped at minimum. No matter how hard they work, they're going to be at minimum. And it may go up a little bit, but
we all work hard.
Yeah. But it's probably only going to vary by maybe 2%. And 2% is not much. Yes, Dell, I see you raising.
Yes, in the situation where we denied such a request, where the church was asking for ECC to provide the pastor's raise, the church had been on, with that pastor, had been on equitable compensation for over 5 years and were unwilling to provide us with any documentation.
Okay. And that's understandable.
And so,
yeah, that you would say no.
It was a no. It was just a flat no.
But I would encourage you to think about this in terms of, like I say, if a pastor truly is working hard to get their church off of equitable comp, at some point, do you allow the church to do something beyond the minimum? Just a thought. All right. I know I'm running out of time. Do y'all want to hang around for a few more minutes? Or do you want me to just save this for tomorrow? I can do either one.
Go ahead.
I have another meeting in 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's plunge on for 5. Actually, this is not a great example. Let me get to all right. Okay, let me get to okay. A DS calls you and says that an elder with 16 years of experience is on voluntary leave of absence and is entitled to CEC funds, paperwork to follow. What is your response? Voluntary leave of absence.
Nope.
Do you say yes, or do you say no? Or do you say something else?
No.
I hear no. Anybody else? I see some thumbs down. Okay. All right. Any idea what the Book of Discipline says?
None.
What do you think the Book of Discipline says? All right. Let me introduce you to a new paragraph for you. First thing you're going to say is, give me some more information, because paragraph 354.6, clergy on voluntary leave of absence shall have no claim on conference funds. And again, it's all about having a claim. But, this is the Book of Discipline. You ever seen a paragraph of one sentence? No. All right, it keeps going. Notwithstanding the foregoing, in exceptional circumstances, on recommendation of the bishop and the district superintendents, salary and or other benefits subject to the terms of the applicable benefit plans may be granted to a clergy member, if applicable, by a vote of the clergy session of members in full connection of the annual conference. In the interim between sessions, the annual conference, by vote of the Bishop, Cabinet, Executive Committee of the Board of Ordained Ministry, salary and or other benefits subject to the terms of applicable benefit plans may be granted if applicable. You got to love that. In other words, they may be entitled to it. What you're going to need is, and I had this happen, and I said no to start with, and the district superintendent kindly informed me of this paragraph and enlightened me. I said, okay, but now what I need is a letter from the bishop, the cabinet, and the executive committee of the Board of Ordained Ministry authorizing me for these funds. I need to know, it's got to meet that approval in the interim. And if you send me that, then I will grant the funds. So be aware that, and this is an extreme circumstance, but you may be asked for a clergy on voluntary leave of absence. It happens, you know, extraordinary circumstances, and the bishop and the district, the cabinet may say, hey, we want to do this. So I said, I've only seen it happen once, but I just want you to be aware before you say no. And pretty much, yeah, I was going to ask, anybody want to share, if they can, something that happened, something out of the normal I presented you with several abnormal circumstances just to kind of open your eyes to see where some of the corners and nooks and crannies in the discipline are and the judicial council decisions. So any thoughts? Anybody want to share anything?
Now, this is Mike Crost, Illinois Great Rivers Conference. We just recently had one that had listed 4 different reasons why they needed equitable comp. One was COVID. One was the decrease in significant donors, pastoral transition. But the kicker was a $60,000 expenditure. In 2019, a student driver drove in the church building. The driver's insurance didn't cover the extent of the damage. This left the church responsible for a $60,000 bill that they took out a loan for, and they were making payments on.
Okay.
We also went back and said, you might want to get a new insurance agent.
Well, and your trustees failed to do their due diligence.
Right.
You know, I have often, and Stephen, maybe you'll back me up on this, I've often encouraged cabinet members to ask, you know, make sure the trustees have adequate insurance at charge conference. Will it cover things like this? You know, and that, because this is one of those things when they have a shortfall, who are they going to come to for the money? They're going to come to equitable compensation. And so it's encouraging, you know, does their insurance cover loss of revenue? You know, a lot of businesses have insurance that cover loss of revenue. You have to prove what your revenue stream was, but hey, you've got the records. But does your insurance cover loss of revenue? So you may want to check on that. All right, please, I put my email back up. Well, I didn't put my email back up. There it is, my email up. Please email me some questions or some topics you want covered before we go. We have one final session tomorrow. Starting, I think, 11 Eastern time. So whatever time that is for you. But please email me. Okay.
All right.
That's it for me. Thanks again to all who participated.
Just as a housekeeping for tomorrow, we will have chat open, but as Jeremy has shared his email, that may be the best way to get directly to him if you have questions. But we do have chat, and we will be saving those chats and answering some of your questions from the chat after we make the videotaping of this session and the PowerPoints and all the handouts available to you after everything is over.
I won't be checking it during the session, which is why it's helpful. That's why Sharon's there to check the chats during the session. But if you would send me some between now and then so that I can get the PowerPoint and have it up for everybody to see, I would love to have the topics you're interested in and questions you have. Okay.
And for most of you are looking at chat. So when people are just commenting or answering questions, you may want to take a look at chat and see how others are answering if they're not, doing so on screen. So excellent.
I see several mics that are open, and so let me call on them. Let's see, Don, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say thanks for your time. Thanks for leading us.
Okay. Paula, that was you
Thank
too?
you. Yep.
Mike?
Thank you.
All right.
Gotta go.
All right. Y'all take
You
care.
all. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.